There's a new way to make a baby, combining DNA from 3 adults. Doctors have taken DNA from the eggs of 2 women to create a hybrid egg that was fertilised with a man's sperm. So why did they do it? The vast majority of genetic information is transferred through the nucleus of the egg cell, but a small amount is also passed on through what's known as mitochondrial DNA, which comes from the mother. In this case, the mother had mutations in her mitochondrial DNA, which meant she could have passed on a fatal genetic disorder to her child. 2 of her children did inherit it and died. The couple, who are from Jordan, wanted to have their own healthy baby, so they turned to doctors in New York for help. Using a technique called spindle nuclear transfer, the doctors took the mother's healthy egg nucleus and combined it with the mitochondrial DNA from a donor egg. They then took the sperm from the father and went ahead with the normal IVF process. And 9 months on, the mother gave birth to a healthy boy. The baby has less than 1% of his mother's gene mutation, which means he hasn't inherited the disorder. The science worked this time, but it's raised questions about conceiving a modern baby. Louise Brown was the first test tube baby in the world, born in 1978 in the UK. Since then, 5 million children have been born through in vitro fertilisation techniques. In many countries, it's become a normal way to have a family. Advances in medical science have also meant IVF has been used for genetic screening. Doctors can screen embryos to find out if they carry hereditary illnesses like cystic fibrosis and haemophilia. It's then up to prospective parents to decide if they want to implant those embryos. The 3-parent baby is a major medical breakthrough. But just because gene technology is improving and new methods are possible, is it ethical to alter the genetic makeup of a child? Natalie Pohonen, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from London is Dr. Dusko Ilic. He is a reader in stem cell science at King's College in London. And I'm also joined by Josephine Quintavalle. She is the director of Comment on Reproductive Ethics, or CORE, an organization focusing on ethical dilemmas surrounding human reproduction. Thanks both so much for joining us. Dusko, I'd like to start with you. Tell us why you see this as such a positive scientific breakthrough.
I see it as a positive scientific breakthrough because we are able to move forward in curing incurable disease before. And 3-parents baby, this is not first time that this happened. In the 1990s, it was done in the United States, and it was not quite clear how to do. And so their procedure was unsafe, but several people, maybe think about 20 of them, are still alive, they're healthy teenagers. Now we are able to know how to do technically, and this is proof that we can actually cure incurable disease. So it's a big advancement.
Josephine, you and your organization have put forward arguments that this step is actually unethical and it's risky at the same time. Why?
Well, I mean, first of all, we must celebrate the birth of this child who apparently has no mitochondrial disease at the moment. But we've got to unpick what happened. One of the issues that my organization has campaigned against for a long time is casual approach to egg donation. We don't even like the idea of using the word donation because usually the eggs are sold. But there have been many cases of women who've been involved in giving their eggs up to research purposes, which is what happened here, who've suffered incredibly badly from a syndrome known as hyperstimulation syndrome. So it's not that you can get hold of human eggs as easily as all that. They're not something that you buy in the supermarket. Women have suffered a lot in the process of donating their eggs. But also, I think you have to look at the fact that this is not a cure for mitochondrial disease. It will continue to appear randomly in our society, and we have to find a cure for those babies who will be born in the future and for those who already have the disease itself. We want to cure everybody. I mean, there's a lot more that went on behind the scenes in this case that we don't know too much about. You know, 5 embryos were created.
But
only
Josephine,
one was considered good enough to go ahead. What happened to the other 4? What was wrong with them?
Okay,
what will happen in the future?
But right now, we have a baby whom it looks like will not suffer from a potentially fatal disease because this, you can call it a cure or whatever you'd like, because this development was found. How is that not a fantastic cure for this illness?
Well, I did start off by saying that we celebrate the birth of any child, and it includes this one. But there's been a considerable amount of concern worldwide, not just from people who come, as I do, from a pro-life perspective, but many who've considered that this was taking place in a country where there were no proper controls, and there's a lot more information that it has to come to be presented before people can really analyse what did happen. As I say, I hope it is a happily ever after story for this particular baby, but you do have to unpick how this baby was created. And as I say, one of the issues is that eggs from another woman were used in the process.
Okay, Dusko, you seem to at least agree with some aspects of Josephine's case there.
Yeah, I do agree with partly, but I disagree partly. So I agree that this was done in Mexico where there is no regulation, and I'm really unhappy how it was done, because we don't have information whether this particular physician who did the procedure, what was measures of precautions, how much were patients at risk. On the other hand, here in UK, we have a team from Newcastle who is working on this type of the so-called three-parent baby, which expression that I don't like much, for years, and they really know what they're doing, so patients are not as much at risk. What I disagree, it is great moving forward. You have to use human eggs to practice and to move forward field. It will probably, it's happened in Mexico, but this would push forward legislation in UK and in other countries, and in the future we'll get rid of this.
And Dusko, the first three-parent baby is expected to be born in the UK next year. Is that's something you do look forward to as a doctor here?
Of course that I'm looking forward. I mean, to be honest, I was expecting that first three-parent baby, that first baby that was cured of mitochondrial disease, free of mitochondrial disease, would be born in UK. But this was, how was done this in Mexico, it was a kind of, I'd say, not expected.
Okay, so Josephine, if that baby will be born in the UK next year, will your organization try to prevent that birth and others going forward?
Well, it's not my organization. I think one needs to look worldwide at the sense of anxiety that there's been in the press over this story, because there's so little known about how it was actually achieved. But I do want to reflect yet again, because it's something I'm very concerned about, is the process of harvesting women's eggs. I think you do need to know a lot more about what's gone on in that field. This can't go ahead the way it was done in the Mexican experience without using human eggs. You can't get human eggs easily. And I do know young women. I know a young 19-year-old who sold her eggs because she wanted to get her...
You do expect the United Kingdom to follow
can't.
the highest ethical standards, right?
Well, one would like to think so, but I think if you're trying to pass legislation for something that's unethical in itself, no amount of legislation can make it ethical. And I also say it's not providing a cure for mitochondrial disease. It's trying to create an embryo and then the fetus developing without the disease, but it's not going to cure the mitochondrial disease in those who are born randomly. So,
but
you know, it is an issue of...
That's what I'm failing to understand. Is this not the best alternative to a cure that would have to come later on when somebody is already suffering? This stops the suffering before it even starts.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about the person who's suffering, that's the very person I'm concerned about. That's the person we should be helping. Doing this three-parent embryo approach, using genetic material from two mothers, we don't know in the long term another issue here. What will happen when these children created in this way grow up and they come to want to reproduce? What are the longer term significance of these
But
so-called
scientists
breakthroughs?
always do have to
This
enter
is what
the
ethics is about.
unknown. Scientists have to enter the unknown territories in many respects. And in the case of IVF, it's been proven, in spite of the critics, that these were born healthy children and they remain healthy adults decades later. Do you not think that could be the same for the three-parent babies?
Well, I think if you look at IVF, you are looking at an attempt to mimic nature. There was never any sense of using two mothers or two fathers. It was always sperm and egg and creation. It was, as I say, it was mimicking nature. This is not mimicking nature. We don't have maternal input from we don't have two lots of maternal input in the natural course of events. So I think this is what we have to be concerned about. And you also do have to look at the background to this particular story. As I say, 5 human embryos were created. We believe that life begins at the moment of conception when the embryo is created, and that is a fact too.
Okay.
That's how Louise Brown and everybody else came into the world. So what about the 4 who didn't make it? Evidently 1 died and 3 others were seriously abnormal. You are experimenting on this child, and let's see what happens. I mean, I sincerely hope it's happily ever after, but things could go very wrong.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me get Dusko's response, because Josephine, you obviously see an embryo as equivalent to a human child. But Dusko, go ahead.
Well, I don't see embryo equal to
child?
human child. It's no consciousness. It's just clump of the cells. It's the beginning of life. And if we have this concern, there would be no pre-implantation genetic diagnostic. There will be no number of the children and families who were able to get children in the next generation free of diseases like Huntington disease or cystic fibrosis, spinal muscular atrophy, all those genes that we know, diseases that we know that are transferred by one gene. So yes, you create in IVF, you process a number of the embryos. Some of them have mutations, some of them not. And those that are unhealthy, you don't transfer to women. You don't bring to life. You stop there.
Dusko, if this path of research is prevented because of the ethical debate around it, how much do you think will be compromised in the way of what other cures or treatments could be discovered?
But so, I mean, the whole point with mitochondrial disease is it's once when child is born, there is no cure, there is no treatment. We have no way to help them. There is no possibility. So the only way that you do intervention is at that stage. And so what actually bringing genes from the third person, that is only, in mitochondria we have only about 30 genes, and they're all of them encoding enzymes for energy production. So there is nothing else, just energy production enzymes. All other traits and characteristics are from parents that sitting in nucleus. So they're still from 2 parents.
Let me get final words from Josephine.
Well, I mean, I do go back to this concept that human life begins at conception. The value that you attribute to it may differ amongst different people, but it's an indisputable biological fact that that's when human life begins, and that's when human life is worthy of respect. My last word would be find a cure for mitochondrial disease which doesn't involve this manipulation, this genetic manipulation of the human embryo.
Okay, Josephine Quintavalle and Dusko Ilic, we're going to have to leave it there. I'd like to thank you both so much for joining us on the Newsmakers.